Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Ryden. You know, it's been said and attributed to many different people that history is written by the victors. Whoever said it, they may have had a point. It's been the observation of our guests today that history books written at different times will vary in their accounts. Dr. Anthony Emmett joins us now from Australia. He had a remarkable 35-year career as a plastic surgeon and in retirement moved into the world of sculpting. He's a man of many interests, as proven by his latest book, The Path of History. Enter the gates of wisdom, tear down the veil of ignorance. Dr. Emmett, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I guess it was George Santayana who warned those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Sounds like that's sort of the theme of your book in some ways, you know?
I believe that we benefit from knowing what has gone before and why it happened. And I grew up in the north of Queensland, Australia. I was 9 when I heard on the radio that Britain had gone to war with Germany over a place called Poland, which at the age of 9 in North Queensland, I didn't really know where it was. But, and then it looked like we'd be invaded for a while, and we were evacuated south until the Battle of Midway changed the dynamics of the Pacific Naval War, and we could go home. You remember that at the Battle of Midway, the Japanese lost 4 big aircraft carriers, and that totally changed the way the Pacific War went. So I, as a child, was very aware of history, and I have been ever since. I find it a fascinating subject, and so I've put this book together, which really covers right from the beginning right to now in one book. And I've done it briefly, and I myself find the book quite fascinating.
What's your audience? Who are you hoping to read this, and what do you hope that they'll get out of it?
Anybody who wants to know what has happened, why it happened, and how we ended up the way we are.
Well, you say that history books change over time. What are some examples in your book of how the retelling of history has significantly shifted and why?
One example is the history of the invasion of Prussia by France in 1870. Britain had helped Prussia fight Napoleon in the Battle of Leipzig at 1813. The Battle of Leipzig, 1813, was a crucial battle in the history of Europe. And that was a battle that was very large, a lot of casualties. It occurred over 3 or 4 days. The casualties from it were enormous. And it's interesting because a man called Diefenbach, who was the world's first plastic surgeon, was present. And that's what impressed him to get involved with the treatment of all these injuries. And so the first book on plastic surgery was written in 1835 by colleagues of Diefenbach, who was later a professor of surgery in Berlin. Britain and Prussia were very good friends in those days. And so history of some things then, written before the 1914-18 war and written after it, really express a different outlook. So the British and the Prussians were quite good friends in 1830 and 1870. It didn't change till 1914 when the British decided to help the French.
Mhm.
Up till then, um, for example, Prussia had been occupied by the French army for 7 years at an earlier stage. And opinions vary with all of these social events. And I change in opinion over that period of time. So, so I produced this book.
Well, I always find it interesting when I see things going on today and people are taking it from the context of what they believe now. And I always think, I wonder how this is going to read 100 years from now, if it's actually, if we're actually going to get the truth, or, because everybody seems to have their own version of what's right and what's wrong as far as history. And I just wonder sometimes what it's going to be like 100 years from now. It'll be different, I suppose.
um, yes, and we'll transmit the information differently.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. What inspired you to trace what you call timeline paths through history?
Oh, one thing affects the other. For example, in 1870, Napoleon III, who was the ruler of France at the time, he was the one who rebuilt Paris
Mhm.
with a man called Haussmann. And they put in the beautiful boulevards in Paris. But he had been the adopted son of Napoleon I. And so a lot of what he did, opinions vary depending on the time.
Mhm.
And Napoleon III declared war on Prussia over the Spanish succession in 1870. Now, Napoleon I had had no difficulty conquering Prussia and the German states. In fact, Prussia was occupied by the French army for 8 years at that stage. So, but what Napoleon III hadn't realized was that the Prussian army had been reorganized by a man called Helmut von Moltke, who had initially been financed by the British to
Hmm.
re-equip the Prussian army to fight the French. And a set of opinions followed from that. Now, Napoleon III was defeated because the Prussian army had been upgraded. And so the French had to pay reparations to the uh, Prussians. Now, what people forget is that when Napoleon I was preparing his army of 600,000 to invade Russia, because Russia was breaking the British continental blockade, I explain all this in the book.
Mhm.
Um, he assembled his 600,000 men in Prussia and Poland, and they ate all the food. Not only that, they stole all the farm horses. They stole 300,000 farm horses from just about every farm lost its horse because Napoleon wanted to take 1,200 cannon with him into Russia. Napoleon had a system of integrating cannon fire with infantry battling. That was his specialty. Anyway, they had left an awful, um, almost starvation in those countries because they ate all the food
Hmm.
and then departed to Russia. Now, when the Prussians then defeated the French in 1870, they demanded reparations, which to a degree were revenge for what had happened in 1812 when they were going to invade Russia. So people remember, society remembers, and and that creates opinions, and people write them down. You know, opinions do change, as you know. In the United States, opinions change.
Yeah. The idea that diseases of rulers influenced the course of history is kind of fascinating. Give us an example from your book where this had a major impact on civilization.
Well, in World War II, Germany was ruled by the Nazis, and the chief of what they called the Gestapo was a man called Heinrich Himmler.
Mhm.
And what wasn't known was that Himmler used to get the most dreadful stomach cramps, and none of the doctors could give him any medicine that fixed it. But he found a Finnish masseur called Felix Kirsten who could cure it. And so he regularly called on Kirsten to come and do his magic with getting rid of his severe stomach pains.
Hmm.
This, of course, was all secret.
Yeah.
And anyway, one day, Himmler asked Kirsten if he could help Hitler with his problem. And it turned out Himmler produced Hitler's medical file, which was 27 pages long.
Wow.
And it turned out that Hitler had attacks of dizziness, headache, and tremor, and really wasn't very well at all, but they hid that.
Mhm.
So Himmler asked Kirsten if he could fix Hitler, showed him the file. Now, the file showed that Hitler had tertiary syphilis of the brain, sometimes known as taboparesis. He'd caught it in 1937 in Austria. He'd been treated and they thought cured, but it had come back again.
Hmm.
And a lot of the silly decisions that Hitler made were the result of tertiary syphilis of the brain.
All right.
Now, this is quite well known. It's in a published book. I've got a couple of copies of it. It's quite a fascinating story. But that, of course, was a disease of ruler that was totally unknown. It was kept as a state secret. People today still do not realize that a lot of Hitler's poor decisions were the result of tertiary syphilis of the brain. You don't see it now because it's sensitive to penicillin, but penicillin didn't become available till about 1940.
No, but there are other diseases that can have that same sort of effect on history too, that we keep hidden, that kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
One last thing, if we're to intelligently plan our future based on a deeper understanding of our past, what lessons are most urgent for us to apply today?
Well, going through this book, I talk about consciousness. The important thing is that we should practice love and kindness, and we should give to others. And if we do that, the world will be a better place. I spent a bit of time with a man called Sai Baba because I wanted to find out. I'd had a voice within as a child. My father had been a very busy doctor in North Queensland in World War II. And as a child, I had to fix everything in the house. And frequently I didn't know how. So I would sit with the object and wait. And the knowledge of what to do always came. Now, I didn't know where this came from, but at age 9, decided to do surgery as a career, and I proceeded to do that. And I expected I would find out where this voice within came from, but I never did. So later on, when I retired, age 61, I had the opportunity to go through past lives with Sai Baba. Now, a lot of our society don't believe there's such a thing as past lives, but I proved to myself that there were. And I also found out a lot about consciousness. And we all, for example, the consciousness we're using now is 15%. Our consciousness is like an iceberg. the bit we're using now is only 15%. The other 85% is not conscious in our thinking mind. And so we run the body. For example, the complexity of running the body is done from the unconscious mind. If you were busy running your body now, you wouldn't have time to talk to me.
Sure. Right. Of course. That's like you said before about the golf swing. You know, if you are thinking of 42 things to remember at the point of contact, you'd never be able to hit the ball. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Yes. Well, it turns out there are many interesting things about our deeper levels of consciousness. And Sai Baba taught me a great deal. I had sessions for 2 years in which they would produce scenes from my past lives. And these would appear on the inner screen of my mind. It was quite brilliant. It was like I'm looking at you now with your starry background. And so I spent 2 years going through all of this and learning about levels of consciousness.
Well, how would you know it was your life and not something else that we were just seeing?
It was my relation. The first thing they showed me was a 4,000 year ago life as an Assyrian general with a chariot, a war chariot. Those fellows used war chariots. It was quite fashionable. And so they showed me in Sai Baba extracted these details from the records for me. He was in India. I was in Mossvale, Australia. And he had the ability to do that. Very interesting fellow. You would have had a lot of fun interviewing him.
I've had fun interviewing you, of course. This is the second time we've been able to get together, and always a pleasure to talk with you. You lived a fascinating life, and I can't wait to see what's next. And when you do have your next book come out, whatever it's about, we've got to do this again.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for joining us. And the name of the book is The Path of History. Enter the Gates of Wisdom, Tear Down the Veil of Ignorance, and you can find it on Amazon. Thanks again for being with us, and thank you for spending a few minutes with us on the Global Book Network. I'm Paul Ryden. We'll see you next time.